The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
And now, it's time for Radio Jobline with your host, Scott Possessor, right here on 103.9 LI News Radio.
Welcome, everybody. You're listening to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor, and one of my favorite guests and one of the most integral guests to the success of my radio show in the past year is a gentleman with the name of Michael Hartzman, who I've become friends with and adore. And plus, he's one hell of a smart guy and knows about the economy. And we have sort of navigated our way through, folks, what we hope is missing a recession. We don't know for sure yet, but there's still some controversy about it. But we're going to talk about that on today's show. Mike comes on every quarter, regardless of weather, regardless of anything, regardless of vacation, regardless of his job. He's here for us to talk about the economy, and he has basically helped my mental health in the last 15, 18 months that we've been doing this, because the economy has been very rocky, and it's affected my business. It's affected a lot of businesses. There are many, many businesses that are dependent on good economic factors. So when your job, your livelihood is directly impacted by the economy, you have to listen to these shows so you know where it's going to be. So again, Michael Hartzman, he's a certified financial planner, a Wall Street veteran who specialized in retirement planning, education, elder and estate planning, life insurance, and long-term care. His vast knowledge of these subjects are discussed weekly on his podcast, The Lebenthal Report, which I have been a guest on. And it's a business show that keeps investors informed about the current market conditions, opportunities, and risks in the financial markets. As co-host, Michael helps guide listeners through the complex world of investing while breaking down today's headlines and stories into easily understood concepts, providing the kind of sound fiduciary advice his clients have received for years. And note, folks, easily understood concepts. That's why we keep having them back, because the economy can get really complicated. Michael's currently partner and president of Lebenthal Financial Services, a full-service independent broker-dealer with an emphasis on financial and retirement planning, as well as president of Bristol Capital Corp., a full-service insurance agency specializing in life insurance, long-term care, fixed annuities, and employee benefits. Michael also taught 12-week course at Long Island University, covering topics such as defined benefits, defined contribution plans, non-qualified plans, Social Security, and prepares CFP candidates for the retirement portion of their exams. He's written various articles on retirement and estate planning, as well as one for us, the Executive Alliance Thought Leadership Team, as well as a state of the market in publications such as 50 Plus Lifestyles and The Legal Brief. He's married to his wife, Donna, and has 2 grown children and 2 beautiful granddaughters. I've seen pictures, so I can verify. He's currently on the board of directors and executive committee of the Kenya Education Fund. Michael, welcome back to Radio Jobline.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you as always. And whoever thought I would like an economist? I pretty much don't like economists. I've had bad experiences. There's always a controversy, Mike. There's always a controversy. For every author who writes an article for the Wall Street Journal or some other very respectable periodical like Forbes or any, there's another author that's writing the corollary, which is enough to drive someone crazy. That does not happen in every industry. It's pretty particular to the economy. So I read an article just the other day. I mean, it was the day before yesterday, a gloom and doom article talking about recession spreading across the country like a disease, that the job market was about to collapse. I mean, these are the types of words, colossally, impactful words that have been used in these articles. So what did I do with the article?
You sent it to me.
I sent it right to you. And it was 7:00 in the morning on Monday morning. And that's how you started your week, thanks to me. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that first, Mike. Why isn't there any unity in what is happening with the economy? Why does there always have to be one person saying one thing, and even a big person, J.P. Morgan or giant corporations saying one thing, and then other people saying, no, you're wrong, it's going to be this way? Why can't we agree?
Because I think economics, Scott, it goes back to the old expression, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And different economists could look at different data facts or look at their own unique data facts that they think are important and draw their own conclusions. So my partner Dominic and I frequently look at these two economists, which we name nameless. Mm-hmm. One is always very, very negative, and one is always very, very positive. And lo and behold, the one of the large financial news networks always have them on their show back to back. Mm-hmm. It brings eyeballs to the TVs, number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, I think sometimes when someone is a contrarian, they also have an easier chance to get themselves heard and get themselves out there.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, economics is really someone's ability to interpret what they see. And they could take that data and they could try to, see unicorns and rainbows, or they could take that data and see gloomy skies like the weather we had yesterday ahead.
Yeah. You thought that was gloomy? I was,
a little bit.
Wonderful. So let me tell you a little bit about our business, Mike. We are in the executive search business, and we are still seeing it's not terrible. It's not bad, but it's not the robust hiring that it was in 2022. 2022 was the best year in our company's history. So 2023 was okay. We're not whining about it. But how's 2024 going to be? Are we going to be better in 2024 than 2023? Is that a fair question?
So I know I come here for you to ask me the questions, but I have to ask you a question. 2022, the economy fell off a cliff. And that's when inflation was hitting, highs we haven't seen in 40 years. Stock market collapsed, the bond market collapsed. Why was the job market so strong in a year where the economy was basically crumbling?
I think it was a leftover from 2021 with all the pent-up hiring from COVID.
Okay. All right.
You didn't think I had an answer to that?
No, I knew you had an answer. I knew you had an answer. I was just curious. I generally was curious. Right. So what do I think 2024 will be? Well, Scott, let's go back to the article that I wrote for Executive Alliance at the end of last year, where good news was finally good news. So let's fast forward to last Friday. Last Friday, the jobs number came out for the month, and the economy grew by 220,000 jobs for the month. All of a sudden, the stock market looked at that and said, that's a little too hot. Now, because that was on a Friday and the market already went down Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the market digested that on Friday morning and then said, all right, maybe good news again is good news. The job market in particular is just not falling apart. It's just not crumbling. And you talked about this on our podcast, whether it's companies have such a hard time finding people, they're reluctant to let them go, or, they're still optimistic about the economy in 2024. I still think that's why the job market has held fairly steady. Tomorrow we're getting inflation data. If that inflation data comes in, not too hot, not too cold, a nice little Goldilocks number, I think that'll be more indication that the investors and economists have confidence that the Federal Reserve could finally start to lower interest rates.
So now I was once under the impression, until of course you corrected me, that once interest rates start coming down, that would be the end of the bad news. That starts to look like good news, because interest rates are getting lower, money's cheaper to borrow, people want to lend it more. It's almost like a loosening, going on when interest rates are dropping. When interest rates are going up, you can't buy a house, your mortgage rates are too high. It seems to put a big, stifle on the economy.
You're right. What you said is 100% correct. However, what we look for in the economy is if they're lowering interest rates rapidly, are they lowering interest rates in order to stop an economy from slowing down to the point where it's going to go into a recession, or slowing down to a point where they just have to kickstart it. And unless there's an extraordinary circumstance, like the beginning of the pandemic, or the beginning of the financial crisis, or the terrorist attacks of 9/11, if we're just in a normal economic cycle, we don't want interest rates to go down too quickly. We want them to go down methodically. Again, Goldilocks, because that is when your assumptions and your knowledge of the economy is spot on. What you said is not incorrect. We don't want it to happen too quickly.
Well, first they were talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 interest rate declines next year. And then recently I heard that there may be as many as 6. And I couldn't help smiling because I always feel like when interest rates go down, it's a good thing. But I know I've learned that it's not necessarily. But what are your feelings about 3 versus 6? Have you heard both numbers?
I have heard both numbers. And God willing, I'm back on the show a year from now,
right? And
we could go over whether I'm right or wrong. I think if the government lowers interest rates 6 times, then we've gone into a recession, a hard recession.
And they're trying to help. They're trying to head it off. Yeah.
So I think the one thing, and we'll get into the market numbers in a minute. I think the one thing that the market is teed up for a disappointment is, again, what you just said. If the market is expecting the Federal Reserve to start lowering interest rates in March, which is now 2 months away, and lower 6 times between March and December, I think that's very aggressive. And I think the market will be disappointed if that's what they're generally expecting the Fed to do. And if the Fed is doing it, again, be careful what you wish for. It's because the economy has really hit the brakes.
All right. So how do you feel about this realistic possibility then? Well, but before we even get to that, let's close out the year. Let's finish out the numbers for the year and let's start attacking this year. So give me a summary of the final quarter.
Sure. So I think a lot of people will be surprised by these numbers. So in 2023, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is the 30 largest companies that get handpicked by I don't know who, a committee, that Dow Jones was up 16.2%. The S&P 500, which is the 500 largest companies in America, that was up a very healthy 26.3%. And the NASDAQ, which is comprised mostly, but not entirely, of technology companies, smaller companies, tech heavy, that was up, Scott, 44.6%.
That's beautiful. So the question becomes, did it happen in time for that to be reflected in everyone's 401k?
Well, yeah, the S&P 500 had a pretty good year right out of the box. If you recall, the beginning of the S&P went up 20% between January and June, then sold off a little bit, and then rebounded 14.4% from its October low to the end of the year. But that number was a little deceiving because in the beginning of the year, the S&P was being pulled up, but with the media dub, the Magnificent Seven. It was 7 very large tech companies that basically pulled up the entire S&P 500. So it was 7 companies dragging 493 companies along for the ride. But the numbers don't lie. It was still up 20%. If you own the index, you were up 20%. Congratulations. Towards the end of the year, the market's breadth expanded. And it was basically most companies now participated in that year-end rally. So that was the difference between kind of, the tale of two markets for 2023. But as we said before the show started, the numbers don't lie. Stock market did what it did. Stock market hit record highs at the end of the year. And if you just simply own the indexes, you did very, very well.
Okay. So I was just looking at our statements, Mike, for my family, and we did okay. We did pretty well. Not as great as we had hoped. Not as great as the numbers you just gave, 22%, 44%, things like that. But we did okay. I'm worried about next year because in 2025, it looks like I may be retiring. So I want to get all I can over the next 18 months, I'm going to do a phased retirement, and, which I think a lot of people are going to do. But how do you think, where am I going to be in 2025?
So just to be clear, I don't want you to feel bad. Most people did not make 26% and 44%. Mm-hmm. I mean, you simply had to be undiversified, have no diversification, and own these two indexes. Mm-hmm. And most people don't do that, Scott. Mm-hmm. Most people, in my opinion, do the right thing, do the smart thing, do what you do, and have diversification. Mm-hmm. And if you're a year and a half out of retirement, you don't want to have 100% of your money in the stock market. You want to be diversified. Now, here's the other part of it. I know a little bit about you. I know how old you are. Mm-hmm. You're retiring. You're not dying, God forbid, right? So you still have to be diversified and have money invested in the market. So the question becomes, for you and anyone else who's thinking about retiring, is, yes, I want my money to make me money, but if you also need income from that account, well, then you also have to make sure that you're not investing too aggressively, because you don't want to be taking money out every month of your account in a falling market, right? So that's a recipe for disaster. But I do think, and 2025 is a very long time from now to make any sort of prediction. But if I look at a normal economic cycle, I think the economy, if we're now out of or still in a falling interest rate environment, the economy should still be okay.
What about real estate? I know you're not a real estate expert, but I'm just curious because many people, and myself included, we have a house and we have equity in that house, and that's going to be part of my the money that I have to retire with. Everyone always says real estate's been doing great. It's been doing great. It's been doing great. I haven't really seen it in my community, but I'm just wondering, how do you see the real estate market if you had to just give some thoughts on where it's going?
So if we are correct that interest rates are falling, then the housing market should be fine, because old guys like us, we want to sell our house, want to get as much money for it. If we're selling it to a young couple in their late 20s, early 30s, early 40s, and they have to take out a mortgage with 7, 8, 9% interest, well, they may not be able to afford your house at the price you want to sell it at. If interest rates are falling, mortgage rates are getting back to normal. Well, what's normal? 4, 5%. Let's call that average. Then you can get a little bit more for your house. So I think with a falling interest rate environment, it helps the sellers and it helps the buyers when mortgage rates come down.
Okay. So, and that's good. So that gives us a little perspective on where we stand on that market. So the next thing to talk about is, where are we going in 2024? So we closed out 2023. You've got two sides of the coin. Maybe that person who wrote that article about the job market collapsing like a disease across the country, maybe he was looking for headlines. He wanted to get on Yahoo. He wanted to get on the front page of Forbes, whatever he was trying to do. And maybe people do that, just to get headlines. But I'm much more interested in your opinion, than his. Okay. So let's take the first 2 quarters of 2024 and give me your best guesstimate of what you think will happen.
I think for the first 2 quarters of 2024, we will remain hyper focused on what the Federal Reserve does and says as it relates to interest rates. As I said, today we're doing the show. It's January 10th. We're recording it. It'll be on the air after the economic inflation data comes out tomorrow morning. Depending on how that data sits, and I do think it'll be, if anything, it'll be kind of right where the market is expecting, or maybe a little weaker. That if it's a little weaker, it might spook the market in the short run, worrying that, again, the market is hitting the skids and heading into a recession. But I do think if that number is relatively tepid, which is a good chance it will be, and we could go into the first and second quarters not going into a recession yet, because don't forget, like you said, it's 2 quarters in a row, then I do think that the market and the economy will continue to do okay. The numbers that I'm reading for the economists that I respect, they're expecting, the S&P to be up somewhere between 7.5% and 10%. No one's going to complain about that happening. And again, I don't really see the economy falling off a cliff. If it does, then all bets are off. But I do think we'll see the economy just maybe slowly deteriorating, but not to the point where the Fed has to overreact.
Okay. All right. So, but a slow deterioration wouldn't be bad, in any way.
That's what the Fed wants.
Yeah.
You know, I've said on this show before, when they start raising interest rates, Scott, they know they're going to break stuff, right? Well, when they broke the back of the banks in March, if you remember that, those bank failures, typically they think they're going to break the back of the job market, and they haven't.
All right. So a lot more to come in the second segment. You're listening to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor, and Michael Hartzman is joining me today to talk about the economy for 2024. What could actually be more important than that, folks? If you have an idea for Radio Jobline, you can write to me, scottp118@gmail.com. scottp118@gmail.com. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll see our weekly column about everything, all things business, and we'll be right back.
May the four winds blow you safely home. Roll away the dew. Roll.
And now, welcome back to Radio Jobline with your host, Scott Possessor, right here on LI News Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. Listen to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor. We're here for you every week to talk about your career, to talk about the job markets, the talent pools. And one of the things we really talk about, especially in the last few years, with the talk of recession lingering quarter after quarter after quarter, is the economy. And we have the best, Michael Hartzman, with us today, joining us. I really appreciate you being here, Mike. And I want to talk to you about a couple more things. This time last year, exactly, we were talking about a recession, a possibility of a recession.
Yes.
We seem to be doing the same thing 12 months later. And 2 full years ago, the same thing. We were talking about, at this time of the year, a recession lingering. I remember, I don't know exactly when, if it was 20, 24 months ago, 28 months ago, something or other, there was like a clock ticking that stopped, that the way things were going suddenly changed, right? And then the lingering R talk started, and it's been going on. This is the third year. So when do we stop talking about it? When do we drop it like a bad habit?
So first of all, let me thank you for allowing me to quote the great philosopher and New York Yankee, Yogi Berra.
Please.
Because it's deja vu all over again.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Right.
And number two, again, you're 100% correct. Last year, if anyone went back to listen to the podcast I do with Dominic or listen to our show with you, experts, air quotes, experts were talking about interest rates going down in 2023. And Dominic and I, said then, a year ago, we thought it was a ridiculous premise because the Feds weren't even done raising interest rates last year at this time.
Right.
What would have had to happen for them to lower them?
I don't even remember talking about that.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Trust me. So yeah, we've been talking about this for a very, very long time. And we were talking about a year ago, a soft landing, a hard landing, a no landing for the economy. That's all recession speak. So you're not wrong. This has been bubbling around for a very, very long time. And the problem is you don't know you're in a recession until you've been in it for 6 months. So for all I know, we could be in a recession right now. I don't think so.
But isn't a recession defined by 2 consecutive bad quarters of GDP?
Yes.
Okay, so if we just had a good GDP quarter just now, the last one.
Well, right. So if we have a negative GDP tomorrow and another one in 3 months, that means technically we're in a recession right now.
Okay.
I don't think we are, right? Now, is it possible that tomorrow's number is the economy was flat or down a little? That's possible. And yes, the back of the napkin definition of a recession is 2 negative quarters in a row. There actually is an office in Washington with a bunch of economists way, way smarter than me, which take way more data than those 2 simple facts. And they're the ones who officially declare a recession. But all that being said, you're right. It's exhausting that all we've been talking about for 24, 36 months is the possibility of a recession. And that is why the economy, the market, investors remain hyper-focused on interest rates. And Scott, let's not forget, there's a whole big world out there other than interest rates. There's a war in Ukraine. There's a war in Israel. You always bring up prices. There were supply chain shortages we had to deal with at one point. That seems to have been resolved. There's corporate earnings. There's so much that goes into the soup of economics and investing. But again, all everyone wants to talk about is if Jerome Powell catches a cold, what's the implication for the rest of us? Right. And Jerome Powell, whoever doesn't know out there, is a Federal Reserve chief.
Yes. And so far, he seems to have done a pretty decent job. Although I have to say, when he was raising interest rates, I wasn't too happy with him. But I get it. I understand now. Again, thanks to you and thanks to all your appearances on this show, I've learned a lot, about the economy. But I am concerned about prices, Mike. Now, look, the average American cannot go to a baseball game. It's too expensive. I'm serious when I say that. The average American family cannot afford to go to a baseball game. With the salaries they're paying $700 million to Shohei Ohtani, you must be kidding me. It's gotten off the rails. It's completely off the rails, out of control. But the thing that bothers me, you go into the grocery store and I buy the same things every week. And I've been buying the same things every week for years. And I used to spend $80. Now I'm spending $120 on the same things. I went into CVS last week to buy my soap. I use one of those soaps in a bottle, not the bar soap. And it's $7.49. And I'm like, how can that be? This is water with a little stuff in it to gellify it with some soap in it. So I used to pay $4.79, and now it's $7.49 for that same soap. So are companies gouging us, or what is the reason for this? And when can we reasonably expect prices to start coming down?
That's a lot to unpack. I don't think prices are coming down anytime soon. The definition of inflation is prices increase. When inflation slows down or is neutral, it means prices are increasing, less quickly. They're increasing slower. Unless a consumer boycotts a product or simply doesn't buy it, and it gets back to supply and demand, there is no real reason for a company to lower prices unless, again, there's competition and there's another product out there that you might have an interest in that you may want to buy that you could buy for $5, right? But that soap that you bought may not get any cheaper anytime soon. But the hope is, Scott, it's not $8 six months from now, right? At the moment, I think that's the best you could hope for, that there's some price stability.
So how do Americans get out of this mire then? How do we get back to where we were, Mike? Can we ever get back to where we were? Will prices ever go back down to where they were?
What year? How far back we going?
2020, 21?
I don't know. No, I think, Scott, yes, inflation was up very, very quickly and went very, very high in a short period of time. What would cause prices to go back to the good old days of pre-pandemic would be, deflation, where the economy is decelerating at such a point that, manufacturers forced to cut prices. But it's not just the manufacturer. It's not just, and I don't know where you buy your soap from, if it's Johnson & Johnson or another company, it doesn't matter to me. But don't forget, they have to buy the material to put that soap in. Mm-hmm. They have to ship it. They have to get it to that store. Whether it's through, rails or truck drivers. So it's all of these factors that affect the price. So maybe, if the price of gasoline, fuel, that goes down, maybe that could help the price of consumer goods to go down if it costs less money to get these products to the end user.
And it's still sticker shock when you go to buy a car too.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the same car you would have bought 3 years ago is now thousands more.
You're correct. And again, so here's the dichotomy of that. Somebody's buying them because if they weren't buying them, the prices would come down.
So the best thing maybe is to boycott. I wanted to do a shout out to a company called IKEA. They had a cute commercial on TV not long ago, and they said, "You know what? We know it's tough. We're going to lower our prices." And they did. They lowered their prices. That means they must be making less profit. But I bet you brought a lot of people into the store. Maybe it's a marketing thing. Maybe companies that sell so much consumer product, could be saying, well, we're going to be the ones. We're going to be the first ones. We're going to lower the prices. We're going to give you a 10% discount on everything we sell starting tomorrow. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing? And then other companies would have to do it, in order to stay in tune, and otherwise they'd lose out. So I'm just wondering if there's some sort of groundswell of American supporters that need to get behind this and say, we're the ones that can control the prices. We have the pocketbook. We have the wallet. It's up to us to do the right thing to make prices come down.
Yeah, Scott, there is that. But there's also the question of convenience, right? Because I remember 20 years ago, maybe it's more now, I lose track of time, where BJ's and Price Club and Costco came to being, and you go to these stores and you buy, gallons upon gallons of soap and 100 rolls of toilet paper at a time. And it was cheaper, right? The water, everything was cheaper, but you bought it like you were opening a grocery store. And then Amazon comes along and suddenly you could go on your phone and literally swipe from right to left or left to right, and these things magically appear. So I think also a part of prices going up is people, Scott, now, and you may not be, right? You're still schlepping to CVS, but people are more willing to pay for convenience, to have someone else do their grocery shopping, right? To go on Amazon and click a button. And maybe that's part of the reason why things remain a little bit more expensive than you would like.
So you're saying that companies like Amazon are part of the reason that products are more expensive?
No, I'm saying companies like Amazon have created a model of convenience that has maybe convinced or encouraged people that their time is more important than, going to the store if it could be delivered right at their front door.
Yeah. Well, I'm guilty because I use Amazon, and I just bought a guitar amplifier. I could have bought it at Guitar Center, but I bought it on Amazon.
Because it was probably a little cheaper.
It was a little cheaper, and it was delivered to my house.
Yeah, so again, I don't think Amazon is raising prices, but I think to your point about creating a boycott or everyone stop buying things, I think it's the business model of convenience is what people are willing to pay for, is my point. Why do people use a Grubhub or an Uber rather than getting in their car, driving 5 minutes to the pizza place and driving 5 minutes back? They could pay an upward of $10 more for that service.
Well, I think there's still some COVID people out there that are very worried about mixing their intake of air with other people. You see a lot more masks being worn right now. I was at the doctor's office recently; they were all wearing masks again. So COVID is back. It's not back the way it was. It's an endemic. It's not a pandemic, but it is back, and I think it's making people crazy. And once again, Amazon eliminates that.
Amazon does eliminate that. And you're right. Everything you said is correct. But I still think it could be the middle of July, 90 degrees out, and not everyone on Long Island is sick. Mm-hmm. But still, if you're in your den watching a baseball game and it's just as easy to go on your phone and have a pizza delivered to you rather than you getting out of your chair and driving there 10 minutes, I think some people are still willing to do that, willing to pay the upcharge for that, Scott. And again, does that add to inflation? It adds somewhat, but the cost of food. I was with someone this morning who runs a catering business, and he said the cost of food in his catering business is up 10%, right? But he can't raise his prices for parties because there's so much competition.
Interesting. So they're taking less.
They're making less. Yeah.
Okay. So that's not good.
No.
Yeah.
It's not good. But what is good is people are still throwing parties.
Right.
Right. So yeah, he's making less, but he's still busy.
Yeah. I want to shift over to gas for a minute.
Okay.
I passed my pump this morning, the one that I use every day, and it was $2.93 for gas. And I remember, isn't this down about $1 from last year?
Yes, it is.
I mean, that's a lot. That is a huge number. And when they factor in inflation, do they take gas prices into account?
Oh, yeah. That's called core energy. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, core prices. Mm-hmm. So when you get the inflation data, you'll get housing and oil included in one number, and then they X out that number. So yes, and to your point, the one direct effect that affects people's pocketbook is the price of oil and gas, whether it's heating their homes now in January when it's freezing or when you have to fill up their car. That is an immediate direct effect on people's wallets, both good and bad. Okay, so right now the prices have been coming down. They've been coming down, in my opinion, relatively rapidly over the last 2-3 months. Is this going to continue? I think if we continue to have a relatively mild winter, it could continue. And the other thing I mentioned briefly, the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel, if those wars, God forbid, escalate, either one, and the threat of oil production is now in play, then you'll see, price of gas $4 again in a hot second. Mm-hmm. But as long as those conflicts remain confined, and the manufacturers of oil don't use that to beat others over the head with, then I think the prices could stay relatively stable. So I'm going into my car dealer next month, and I'm going to buy my car off the lease, because I'm not going to lease another car that's going to cost me $100 a month more. Plus, I have to put down an extra $1,000. So I'm not doing that. I just feel like a loser if I do that, like I'm being taken advantage of. So I'm going to just, liquefy some money and plunk down $20,000 and own my car, which it's still got 22,000 miles on it. It's a great car. It's got a lot of life left in it. And not everybody can afford to do that, Mike. That's correct. But again, and auto financing is a little bit of a different animal than general financing, is what I've been told. Not an expert, but I've been told that if you need to lease a car, rent a car, buy a car, get a loan for a car, it's a little easier because the bankers know that you need your car, right? You need to get to work. You need your car most likely to survive if you own a car. So yeah, most people may not have the ability to plunk down $20,000, but they could go to the bank, get a loan. Again, if interest rates are coming down, that loan payment should be lower and put them in a position where maybe they can make the same payment for 3 more years or 4 more years, but now they own it. So what's your thought on this car situation? Is this going to improve anytime soon? Because we're talking about possibly prices not coming down for some time, and I would imagine that would translate to the car business as well. I think the car business is really a business of supply and demand, and a business of, if people are motivated to get a new car, or they have to get a new car, they're going to. And to what you said before, that you don't want to pay more for a car, somebody's buying them, Scott, because if they weren't in demand, then you wouldn't have to pay $100 more. You'd be able to pay $100 less, right? So the auto industry is also is always its own island because people treat their cars differently. And as I said, people are still buying them. The technology is always improving. And I think that's part of the appeal of getting a new car. I hope you enjoy your car for many years. But for all you know, 5 years from now, you may get in this car and go, why don't I have blah, 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 which is the next great technology that we won't even know about today.
Right. Well, we bought a new car for my wife last year. So she's got all the new bells and whistles. My car was only 3 years old. It was still on lease. But what I like about it is it only had 22,000 miles.
Like a little old lady who goes to church on Sunday.
I drive these days. I've got a turbo and everything, and I drive like a little old lady. But all right. So just a couple of minutes left, Mike. Give us a couple of your final thoughts on what 2024 is going to look like, what people should be cautious of doing. How should we be maybe managing our money any differently?
I think the way you manage your money is where you should always manage your money. Be diversified, understand what the money's for, understand the timeline for the money, and don't take risks with your head that your stomach cannot withstand. I think that's really super important in both bull and bear markets. I do think that as long as the Fed stick to their policy of they're done raising interest rates now, they will lower interest rates sometime in 2024. Don't let the expectations of the media get you too excited. The one thing that makes me nervous is that the expectation that they're going to lower rates by March or April. I think that's the one thing is it either unlikely or if it happens, something untold has happened in the economy in a very short period of time.
Okay. Now, how can people reach you quickly? Is there a website?
There is a website. It's lebenthalfinancial.com, L-E-B like boy, E-N-T-H-A-L, lebenthalfinancial.com. And my phone number is 516-349-5555.
Is there an email address?
Yeah, you could use my direct email. Is M Hartzman, MHARTZMAN at Lebenthal.com.
Okay, you'd be wise to give Michael a call if you're worried about how you manage your money. Michael, a fantastic job today. So great to see you again.
Thank you.
We're gonna have to book some lunch as soon as we get off the show. If you have an idea for Radio Jobline, write to me, scottp118@gmail.com. scottp118@gmail.com. And listen, connect with me on LinkedIn because you're missing everything if you're not. All the articles that we write about the job market and the economy are on that, and everything we do is on social media. So talk to you soon. Happy hunting.
Roll away the dew. Roll away the dew.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.